Hey, it's Steven with Curvy Woodworking. In this video, I'm going to show you how I put together this bench and table using a solid walnut slab. So the goal for this project is to use one solid walnut slab for the table and a smaller walnut slab for the bench. Now, the first step I have to do is cut it down the middle. There's natural stresses occurring in the tree pulling it apart that was causing some splits down the middle of the slab. So I'm going to use a track saw and give myself two 90-degree edges that I can take to the table saw. The first cut on the table saw is going to be with a 26 tooth blade, and that allows some flexibility when the pieces of wood start to release tension and start to move on you while you're cutting. I'm then going to take it over to the jointer and I'm going to joint two faces so I have a perfect 90-degree edge on the bottom and side. With these two edges, I'm going to take off a very small amount using a 40 tooth blade on the table saw. By taking off a small amount, I ensure that I have it perfectly parallel with one another on the two edges, and the little bit of material I'm moving is no longer contributing to the stress of the wood, so it's now stabilized in this final position. Okay, so now we have the table glued up. We're going to start working on the bench. Now, I had a perfect piece of live edge walnut that was available for this project. I was initially going to cut it into dimensional pieces, but after talking with the client, she wanted to keep the live edge look. Now, normally live edge is a little more expensive related to the handwork you have to do with removing the bark and shaping the live edge. The majority of that work has to be done by hand so that you have those proper contours with no jagged edges. But that being said, because I had the perfect size, there was no change in price and it worked out for everybody. Now, I cut it in half for two reasons. First reason is there was a natural bow occurring in the live edge piece that I needed to readjust to ensure I had a perfect 90 on the bottom and on the gluing face. The second reason is I needed to be able to do this work on the size of my equipment. If I had a larger jointer, I could just flatten the entire surface. However, I only have an 8-inch jointer. The good news is after you glue everything together, you'll have a very hard time finding that glue joint, and as all the grains are going to match up again with one another. That little bit of material that you remove is inconsequential in the end. Now I have the table to the final dimension. We're going to be using a crude jig I put together with the plunge router. I'm going to be installing two slots on the underside of the table on both sides that will accept a steel U-channel. This steel U-channel is going to resist the movement of the table that wants to naturally cup. The reason it wants to naturally cup is I've actually installed all the end grains in the original orientation of the wood. So if you imagine it's in a U shape, so it naturally wants to begin to bow upwards. This channel is going to resist it because we have installed it early on. If you install this channel too late in the process, you will never be able to repair that cupping motion. You can only resist it at the beginning and train the wood to be in its final orientation. You might be wondering, if I fasten these steel channels to the underside, would it allow any movement within the wood as it naturally wants to expand and contract? There are some horizontal slots that will allow the machine screws movement in that direction, so no splitting will occur. Now, I only took a small snippet of this, but this is the tedious work I was mentioning earlier, which is sanding the side. So after I do all the grits from 80 to 320, I still do another couple hours just by hand with the high grit sandpaper to remove any inconsistencies. I'm then going to be using a router roundover bit on both pieces so that I have a nice rollover where your legs will be sitting either on the bench or where your arms will be resting on the table. Now, this client wanted to have prefabricated metal legs, and we decided to go with a trestle design to give it that farmhouse kind of feel. So they already come with a steel base with slots there that will accept screws to fasten it to the table. What I have to do for the bench and the table is to countersink the thickness of that steel so that you don't see that plate protruding on the underside. Realistically, you wouldn't see it from where you're standing. It's just an additional measure that you do that will also help slightly with the strength of the steel table connection. Now for the table leg bases and the steel bar connections, I actually use threaded inserts, and then I use the machine screw that is accepted into those threaded inserts to ensure that I don't have any deterioration of the wood that would affect the strength between that connection. If you just use straight screws, the threads that actually penetrate into the wood are smaller than these threaded inserts, so while it's a very small chance, there is still a small potential that it could get pulled out in the future once the wood starts to naturally deteriorate. So I'm going to put some Osmo oil on the underside of the table before I install the steel channels and the legs to ensure that I properly seal the wood everywhere, even on the underside where you won't see. And then I'm going to start to apply the Osmo oil finish on the top pieces for both the bench and the table. After I install the first coat, I'm going to let it set for approximately 15 minutes before I use a buffer to wipe off the excess of material. And then I'm going to let it set for another 10 to 12 hours before I apply the second coat and repeat the exact same process. And the table and bench combination is complete. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like, hit that alert button, and to subscribe to my channel for more content.